Hey, good afternoon, good morning. I just wanted to welcome everyone to another episode of Truth Serum. My name is Celina Cordoba L, and thank you for tuning in. I really appreciate the support, and words can't express how grateful I am of all the comments and all the questions, and just the plethora of energy and women that I've been able and men that I've been able to meet, and just basically know that sometimes when you do have an opinion that's also backed by facts, and you're talking about something or a subject matter that not everyone necessarily co-signs and or is practicing, it can seem and be very alienating and quote unquote bold. But there's no time but the present to express one's thoughts, especially if it's to help enhance and hopefully raise the vibration and awareness of just things that still keep us kind of blocked and emotionally down. And one of those things that I've been getting, I would say, is a lot of comments and a lot of questions from women about just how to maintain. It's a real simple one, but it's very complex, like most things in life. The most simple things are packed with a lot of levels of complexity. Basically, it's, how do you maintain happiness as a darker skinned woman? And, what's that journey like? And, it's such a difficult thing to even approach because, of course it takes place on, not only how we were raised and what our first impressions and our given circumstances were, but just also our real experiences here. I'm definitely grateful for my upbringing and for my family in a sense, but not all people are aware of the power of melanin and are aware of the beauty of a multitude of different colors. It's definitely, I'll tell you a quick story, just a sidebar, and make sense. So day before yesterday, a really good friend of mine sent me an amazing, and I just would like to give thanks, an amazing clip or documentary about this woman in Brazil that entered a contest called Globressa. And Globressa is like, a huge, little like salsa, merengue, like they basically do all of their dance and their, ancestral, giving back and all their culture, the culture of Brazil. So this beautiful dark-skinned woman entered the contest and she won, right? And it was like the first time that a dark-skinned woman was selected for such a big and such a prestigious award such as this. And I say that because they just never do it. She had basically expressed, and there was a couple people that made commentary and were like, socially it's just not something that's done because, of course, there's a social connotation when you're darker skinned that you're not only of the lower class, but it's a sign of something not having wealth, something not being wealthy, something not having beauty and grace and class. It's like you're niggardly, it's broke, it's ugly, it's bastardly, it's monkey, all of the negative connotations that we're really truly fed through a plethora of imagery, through magazines, through, of course, Hollywood, through video. It's a very quiet elephant in the room, but an elephant is so big, it can't necessarily be ignored. And I think what's happening now with just a whole bunch of social media and just, the evolution of time, it's almost as though it's being blanketed, it's being covered as though it doesn't take place anymore. And it's just something to be aware of because, in watching this documentary, it made me think about so many different things. It was actually really, really interesting because, this beautiful woman won the award. She was celebrated in her beauty and her grace for about 10 minutes because she was so beautiful. But what ended up happening is she talked about receiving a whole bunch of emails about, you're so dark and how could they have picked such a dark-skinned woman, and it's misrepresentation of Brazil, and basically she got a lot of slander, and it really hurt her spirit. And again, it made me think like, wow, this is so indicative of the exact happenings not only here in this country but just throughout time, there has been a planned agenda at transferring and at depleting darker skinned women of their confidence, of their beauty, of their grace, of believing that they are worthy, that they are worth something. It's very much there, but again, you have to make a choice in life and say, okay, if this is something that's so much of an allergen or something that people don't even really want to even address or talk about, because if you do talk about race, it's almost as though you're stuck on it or you're bitter about something, when really in actuality it's almost observing a disease that has been so pervasive but that's continuing but not necessarily being addressed. And I say that to say, this young woman's she was 27, I guess now, but her award was taken away. All of the backlash, it basically was re-given. They gave it to another young woman who was way lighter, and they thanked the dark-skinned woman for her contribution, and they said, I appreciate your contribution, and on the way you shall go. And she sat there and she said, I didn't know that it was going to ensue all this energy, but it really made me think of like, wow, what that must feel like, because I do know what it is to be, kind of ostracized or just quietly ignored. And the way in which you deal with it is, it's very interesting. You have to not only figure out why these things are happening, because there's got to be reasons behind everything, but at the end of the day, how I've dealt with it is by not necessarily focusing and paying attention to it when it does happen. When I'm personally kind of like put in situations, i.e., for example, the other day someone made a comment to me, and she was a Caucasian woman, but the assumption with women of my color is that we don't come from anywhere. We are just black women, and we've never been a race to disconsider, or just because someone is white or is Caucasian, to not think of where they might be from. There's Polish people, there's people from England, there's people from different parts of Europe and different parts of France, and they're considered white Frenchmen. So I always find it very interesting, and I'm grateful that I was raised here. Excuse me, I'm a little chilly. I was raised here because history and the information that's now available is so amazing, because slavery took place on so many different levels, and it's still the effects or the misrepresentation or the misunderstanding of what even happened during that time is so great. We have to give it up to great scholars that have paved the way and that really still are connecting dots that haven't necessarily been connected. But we weren't always darker skinned people. We weren't always slaves, and we weren't always at the bottom of the caste. So when you think about it in terms of just like the Dalits, or like certain castes of people that are just completely, ostracized from society, there's a reason. Melanin, of course, holds so much magnetic properties, and melanin is the thing that allows our skin and our bodies to process, sunlight, vitamin D. There's so much information about it. I'm really more focused on not only thinking about why, and again, reminding women that there is a reason. It's to not only allow us to not have faith in ourselves, but we have to think about our offspring. And I thought about this young woman and the fact that she was disawarded or regifted a gift, and what that must have done to her spirit. It's like we think about our children and we're like, wow, I don't want my daughters to have to go through this type of hazing, and I don't want my sons, or all these things. So now not only are we ashamed of our skin color, but some people, if they're not emotionally supported, or if they don't have any reinforcements of men, of women, of family, reminding them of their beauty, or just being, not necessarily focusing on it. In my family, there was a lot of light-skinned people, and still, of course, still are. But, my grandmother, being from Panama, and my family being Panamanian, she was a very fair-skinned woman, and she attracted a very dark-skinned man, and they had, 6 children, and my mother, being one of them, was a little fairer than me, but she had a very fair-skinned child, my sister, and myself. And at the end of the day, we were raised to not necessarily focus on it, but like focus on color or treat anyone better than the other. But it's not to say that society didn't necessarily do its job and kind of reward or choose my sister or do certain things. And I think my mother, being aware of that, just always made it a point of conversation. And by addressing it, by talking about it, it wasn't something that was like, shh, we're not going to address the fact that this is happening, that Mika gets chosen for certain things and you don't. But at the end of the day, look at how gloriously beautiful you are. And let me remind you that melanin holds a lot of psychic properties. It holds a lot of abilities that people don't like to talk about anymore. There's got to be a reason why there's so much fear around one's skin tone and skin color. And regardless of what those things may be, we have to remember that if something is constantly being whitewashed or constantly being reminded that it's not good, that there's got to be something behind that door. And that's something that I always think about. And regardless, there's going to be a lump sum of ignorance in the world. And I think part of our journey here is to learn how to navigate and not only not take it so personal, but also rise above it and almost be a conduit for change and a barrier of bullshit. Like melanin also repels, and it also keeps a lot of negativity away. It attracts, of course, a lot of ignorance, but with ignorance comes a great responsibility to almost, live in a very peaceful, harmonious space within your own core being, that you resonate a sound or a vibration of love. It sounds corny, but it actually can work. Let me stop this so that it's a little easier.